Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to do a coronavirus crash course training video on the use of a revolver. Okay. Now this is for people that may have just bought a revolver or maybe they inherited it, and you know that you're supposed to go to the gun range, find an instructor, and get trained on it. But you haven't been able to do that, and now because of the coronavirus lockdowns, you can't travel, gun ranges are closed, instructors are not traveling. So I'm going to do the best that I can to give you some training in this video. We're going to go through some exercises to try and, so we can try and bring you up to some level of competency where you could use the revolver for self-defense if you had to, okay? Now, when I did the prior videos, right, I did a video on striker-fired pistols, on AR-15s, on pump shotguns. I was kind of assuming that it was your gun that you recently purchased, or maybe you had it in the house for a few months and you just never got around, or maybe even a year or two, just never got around to the got around to getting the training that you needed. But the point is that the gun was fairly new, okay? A gun that's, even if the gun's been sitting in the box for a year or two, the gun was probably oiled before when it left the factory. So the chances are that the gun is pretty functional. If you have a revolver that's been in your house for several decades, right? Because I've over the last 10 years that I've been an instructor, I've had people come to me with guns that belong to their father or grandfather who was maybe a cop back in the in the 80s, in the 70s, or even in the 60s. So you may have an old revolver in the house that you weren't quite sure what to do with, that's been just sitting in a drawer or on the top shelf somewhere, and now all of a sudden you think that, hey, I might need to use this gun for self-defense. So the first thing we do is we got to figure out if the gun is functional, okay? If that's your case. Now, if that doesn't apply to you, if you just recently bought the gun, then the things I'm going to say now are not going to apply to you, but the things I will say later on will apply to you, okay? So just stick this out for a little bit, it won't be that long. So the situation is you have a gun, a revolver specifically, that's maybe sitting in the holster, or maybe it's not in the holster, and you don't know first of all, we don't know if the gun's safe to shoot, okay? So we're going to have to kind of figure it out. We don't even know if it's loaded maybe or not loaded. Three very important safety rules that we have to be aware of. The gun always stays pointed in the safe direction. Fingers off the trigger, but I mean straight finger, until we're ready to shoot or do our dry fire exercises. And the third rule, we always treat the gun as if it is loaded, okay? So even if the gun's empty, broken, jammed, no matter what, the gun's always loaded. So we're always following our safety rules. Guns in safe direction, fingers off trigger until ready to shoot. Gun's always loaded, okay? So first thing we gotta do is we gotta figure out if this gun is loaded, if the gun is functional, okay? If it's been sitting in the drawer for a very long period of time. If it's in the holster, what we're gonna do is take it out of the holster. Just keep your finger off the trigger. Hold the gun firmly so you don't drop it, but just keep your finger off the trigger. Obviously the trigger is that part right there, okay? And then just by observing it, you should be able to see if there's any cartridges in the cylinder, right? You can see on this revolver, you can see the shiny circles over there. That now, if it's been sitting in there for a couple of decades, that might be a little bit rusted. Okay, if it's brass, that brass may have tarnished a little bit. So that's entirely possible. So the next thing we're going to try and do is we're going to try and open it up. There's a little button here that you push forward to release the cylinder. Okay, so what you're going to do is point the gun down. Okay, finger off the trigger. Okay, again, you got to find a safe roof in your house, safe room in your house to do this. Basement's a good place to go because you can point the gun in any direction except up. If you don't have a basement, go upstairs to the top floor and figure out what the safe direction is, and keep the gun pointed in that direction while you're doing this, okay? So finger off the trigger, with your thumb push that latch, and then with this side over here, push the cylinder so it opens up, okay? So I'll do it again. So you push forward on that latch, you see how that latch goes forward, okay? And then with your middle finger here, just push it forward, and be careful not to put your hand in front of the muzzle while you're doing this, okay? So just push it forward like that, okay? Now, one of the things that I want you to try to do is basically point the gun up. And I'm gonna keep my hands here because these cartridges are just gonna fall right out because these are brand new. Point the gun up, see what happens. There is a plunger over here, right? Actually, let me take the cartridges out. There's a plunger over here, right? And when you push that plunger, all the cartridges should come out. So let me put one in there. Okay, this is the cartridge. The bullet's just that tip over there if you're new to guns. Okay, the rest of this is called the case. If that's in there like that, and when you push this, you see how they want to come out. Okay, so if the revolver is loaded, roll them back in there. Okay, and you go like this, they should all come out like that. Okay, now if the revolver's been sitting there for a couple of years, a couple of decades, the chances are that when you push on that plunger, it may not push out. Okay, so I don't want you to sit there and start hammering away on this. Okay, if that's the case, what I want you to do is get yourself a rod of some type, like this. Okay, get a rod, you know, and what you're gonna do is, as the cartridges are sitting in there, right, you're gonna basically take the rod and push them through the front of the, you know, while the cylinder's open, try and push them out that way, and try to do that with each of them. Hopefully it will come out at that point. So if you go to each chamber, right, the chambers are the holes over here, right? If you go to each one and you push out, hopefully they will come out. You can apply a little bit of pressure. You can try applying a lot of pressure, but if it gets to the point where you have to basically sit there and start hammering away at this rod in order to get them out, then there's a good chance that you're going to push the bullet back into the case. Okay, in which case the ammunition is going to become dangerous. Okay, you can't, if you push this bullet back into the case and then later on you fire this, there's a chance that you may have increased pressures. So that's something that we want to try and avoid. Try to avoid hitting this so hard that you push those bullets back into the case. Now, I'm hoping that you have another box of ammunition for your revolver in the house. If you do, then we really don't have to worry so much about damaging these rounds. Okay, so if you know you got another box of ammo for this revolver, okay, then by all means, you know, put the rod through the front. Okay, you might need somebody to help you, you know, and of course, as long as the cylinder is open, I mean, there's no way the gun can fire. So you can get somebody to kind of help you and push them out through the front. Don't push through the back because the primers are in the back. Okay, you don't want to be pushing on the primer. You want to be pushing on the bullet through the front because there's no way that you can activate that and just get these out. And at that point, regardless of whether the revolver is usable or not usable, we want to get the bullets out because that will make this a lot safer at that point. Okay. Now, there's a very good chance that when you went to open this, you couldn't even get it open if it was rusted that badly. You know, that's a possibility. You know, ideally, I would tell you, you know, if you go to push this open and you can't just do that, you know, I would normally tell you just take the gun to a gun store or to a gunsmith and let them figure out what to do with it. You know, if it's safe or not. But hey, I mean, the situation is what it is. Right now, you can't get to a gun store. You can't go buy a gun. You have to work with this as best as you can. So hopefully, you're able to simply push these cartridges out through the front, and then when you pull them out, you'll look at them and you'll observe their condition. There might be a little rust on them. You know, not rust because if it's brass, it's not going to rust. But you might see that there's some buildup of corrosion. And basically, you can just try to clean that off. If you've got some sandpaper in the house, you can try to sand that you know, down a little bit, you know, to try and get that as clean as possible. The other thing that you can do is if you notice that there's rust in the chambers, you know, you can take your rod, okay, wrap it with sandpaper if you have some, and try to clean the rust out of the inside of the chambers if there's any. Look down the barrel, because usually you can look down the barrel as long as the gun is open. Okay, because now it's an open gun. Now you can kind of look down through the barrel. Usually I can just look through the back like this. But look down the barrel, see if there's any rust over there while the gun is open. And again, you know, wrap some sandpaper around your rod and try to file that sandpaper clean. Okay, once we know that, you know, once you've done that, let's see if the gun is functional. What you're going to do is take the hammer and just pull it back, see if it will come back. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you can basically just, because now we know the gun's not loaded, right? With the ammunition sitting right there. Point it in the safe direction and pull the trigger, see what happens. Does the hammer drop? Is there any resistance? If you see it going down really slow, you know, it might be because there's some rust buildup in there. And again, if there is, maybe you can get a Q-tip in there. WD-40 is really good at breaking up rust. So if you got any WD-40 and there's rust in the gun, you can spray it. You know, use a Q-tip to try and clean the rust off. So basically, just try to get the gun clean. You know what basically a machine is supposed to look like. You know, without rust. So if you see rust on it, try to clean it as best as you can, and get it to the point where at least you can pull the hammer back. Okay, and squeeze the trigger, and the hammer will fall. Okay, so and then see if you can, if it's possible for you to just squeeze the trigger and have the hammer fall in that, fall that way, okay? If you can get these things to happen, then the chances are that you have a very functional revolver that you can use. So now we've cleaned off our ammunition, we got the rust off of it. So hopefully, if you do happen to have another box of ammo, because maybe there was a fresh box of ammo that was, that was stored with the revolver. If that's the case, put these bullets to the side, take out some fresh rounds, examine them for rust, and we're going to use those later on, okay? For now, I don't want the gun loaded. What we're going to do is we're going to just practice holding the gun, okay? When we hold the gun, you want to basically get as high on the gun as possible. You see there's a little spot here over here. You want to get all the way up here. Don't hold the gun from down here like this. Hold the gun as high as you can on the webbing of your hand over here, thumb to the side. And basically with the revolver, I usually cross my thumbs like this. So as you hold it like this, right, straight finger stays straight. Either like this or like that, either way works. With the revolvers, I tend to like to cross it. And the reason I like to cross is because if I want to pull the hammer back, I pull it with that finger, squeeze like that. Now, you may have a single action revolver. This is what we call a double action revolver. Double action means when I squeeze the trigger, it does two actions. Hammer comes back, it reaches a certain point, and then it drops forward. That's double action. Single action is a revolver that you have to pull the hammer back. And then, so if this was a single action revolver, I could be squeezing this all day and nothing would happen. I would have to pull the hammer back in order for that hammer to drop, okay? Again, with single action, you pull the hammer back, then squeeze the trigger. The trigger has only one job. It is to release the hammer after it's in the rear position, okay? Double action, the trigger pulls the hammer all the way back and lets it go forward, okay? So that's the difference between double action and single action. And you have to know what type of revolver you have. Chances are that you probably have a double action revolver, okay? What we need to do next is learn how to use the sights on the gun. Revolvers, let me show you. The sights on this gun are really, see that little notch over there? See the front sight over here? Okay, so in the back you see an opening that looks something like this. In the front you see an opening that looks something like this. And basically what you do is you line them up so that they appear like that. Not like this, not like this, not like this, like this. You gotta basically, you hold the rear sights at your eye level, and then you move the front of the gun around where you need to match up the sights like that, okay? So, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna learn to aim the gun. Get high up in the gun like this, straight finger, cross your thumbs like that. Basically, this is the weakest point in my grip. I'm trying to close that grip, okay? So you see how my hands fit together like a puzzle piece? Okay, if you have small, tiny hands, you might even be able to tuck it under here. For me, that works pretty good. Okay, and this is what we're going to practice doing. Pick a point, pick a target in your room that's about chest level, and hold the gun in like this with your grips. and just practice coming out, bringing the gun up to your line of sight. And when you come up, what I want you to do is match up your sights. Match up your sights like this. Now initially you may have to close one eye. So when you come up, you know, let's say you're, let's do a quick eye dominance test, right? If you make a hole like this, okay, look at something. Right now I'm looking at the camera, and just basically bring it back to your eye and see what eye it goes to. This time I went to my left eye. I'm omnidominant, so if I look at something towards the right side of the room, like over there, I'm going to go to my right eye. So depending on which side of the room I'm looking at. But most people are very right eye dominant or very left eye dominant. I can shoot on either side. So let's say you're right eye dominant. Grip the gun like we said, straight finger. And what I want you to do is just come out. All right, if you need to close one eye initially, close it and then open it. So we're going to do this continuously. All right, so what we're trying to figure out here is how we're going to present this gun so that when we go to full extension, our sights are already lined up. So even if I close my eyes, right now my eyes are closed, if I come to full extension, okay, you know, yeah, my sights aren't perfect, but all I gotta do is make a minor adjustment. What I find with handguns, right, because your hands are close together, people who have not had training, when they come out, they will either present the gun down, especially if especially if the grip is wrong back here, they're gonna do something weird. And if you're holding it, most people when you tell them to hold the revolver, they're gonna pick it up like that, which means when they come out, they're gonna be pointing the gun down into the ground. And if they fire the gun, they're gonna be shooting at the ground, not at the person that's trying to harm them. So that's why you gotta get high on the gun like this and grip it and present the gun out. All right, and practice this repeatedly so that every time you come out, the sights are on the target. Okay, so even if and then practice closing your eyes, coming out, opening up your sights, and seeing how far off you are. You're not gonna be perfect, but you should be somewhere in that general area. Okay, so coming out. Okay, right now I'm about 3 inches to the left, which is not bad. You know, come out, open your eyes. So do this repeatedly. You need to be able to come out and find those sights without too much difficulty. And ideally get to the point where you can do it with both eyes open. And with enough practice, you'll be able to just come out and your right eye, your dominant eye rather, will take over. If you're holding the gun in your right hand, your left eye dominant, you're just going to come over to this side like I am right now. Right, so right now it's lining up with my left eye. Okay, you know, right now it's lining up with my right eye. So just keep doing this to figure out how to present the gun so that in the dark, right? Even if you can't see the sights, because look at the sights. These sights are black. If I turn off the lights, okay, and I have to turn off completely. If I dim the lights, I will not be able to see these sights on this revolver. So with the lights low, I need to know that just because of the way I'm gripping the gun and because of the way I'm presenting, even if I don't see my sights, my muzzle is still oriented at the target or where I want to, you know, without having to make minor adjustments. Okay, so I'm not coming out like this, where then I need to come up like that, or I'm not coming out like this, where then I need to come down like that. I just want to know that I can just punch out and get pretty close to where I want it to be. That's one of the most important things that you need to be able to do with a handgun. With a rifle, it's a lot easier because you got one hand back here, one hand over here, and you basically if you just point your arm, somewhere like if I just come up, I can. It's really easy to sense if I come up, if I'm pointing here, if I'm pointing like this, I know I'm pointing higher. If I'm pointing like this, I know I'm pointing low. So with a long gun, with a rifle, right, an AR-15 for example, best choice that you can have, unfortunately you don't have that right now, but ideally you'd want to have an AR-15 because with an AR-15, all you do is extend your arm and present it and you'll be right there, okay? Even if you don't look at the sights. Inside the home, which is somewhere between 20 and 30 feet. If you extend your arm, you're gonna be pointing it where it needs to point. With the revolver or with any handgun, it takes a little bit more work so that you can present that gun consistently every time, right? And to do this in multiple directions. Okay, so that you're not just always doing it in the same direction. Practice doing it. Let's say you clear the house out if nobody's there. Or get everybody into one room of the house, practicing doing it down the stairs, practice doing it up the stairs, practice different angles like that too, so that you can you can shoot down the stairs if that's what you need to do. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, now that we know how to line up the sights, okay, if you've got a double action revolver, what I need you to do is I need you to extend, put your finger on the trigger. We've already checked the gun, we know it's not loaded, right? Okay, extend, put your finger on the trigger, keep aiming, and then when you squeeze that trigger, make sure that the gun does not move. I'm going to come real close to the camera. Okay, I'm going to do it here so that I'm doing one-handed this way. So when you squeeze that trigger, okay, you don't want the sights to move. You don't want to be doing this, that. Most people, when you give them a revolver, which has a double action trigger, when they squeeze and trigger, revolver has a long, hard trigger pull, especially for women. That trigger pull can be very difficult. So what they will typically do is they'll typically do this. So even if they're aiming, even if they come out and they're aiming at the target, as they squeeze the trigger, they'll usually bring it down. I see this all the time. I'm not hating on women here. It's just what I see them do all the time. Okay, and we need to be aware of that. Okay, so if you're a woman watching this, be aware that because of the strength differences, that's what you're going to want to do. As you squeeze the revolver, you're going to want to pull it down. Pick a target, a doorknob or whatever, and basically squeeze that trigger. And basically you want to squeeze that trigger and not have the sights move off the target. So let's say I'm aiming at this. When I squeeze that trigger, I don't want my sights might move a little bit, but I don't want them to go like that. And usually with a revolver, you're going to see that. As you squeeze it, you want it to just stay right there. Okay, so that's the important thing. Now, if you've got a single action revolver, okay, what you're going to practice doing is, single action revolver means you've got to pull the hammer back every time. Practice with this thumb here, right? Take this thumb here, pull it up, cock back, aim, gently press. Don't let the sights move off the target. Cock back, aim, gently press, cock back, aim, gently press. Same deal. Cock back. Oops, that time it slipped. Aim, gently pressed, cock back, aim, gently pressed. That's one of the things that can happen with a single action revolver. As you go to pull it, you may slip like I just did a second ago. So this is something that you got to practice. You have to practice, aiming without having to adjust the sights too much. Just punch out and you should already be there. Get your finger on the trigger, squeeze the trigger without moving your sights off the target. If you've got single action, cock your hammer back, put your finger on the trigger, squeeze the trigger without moving your sights too far off the target, okay? And then finally, the next thing that we need to do is we need to practice loading this. Again, make sure you're in a safe room, in a room where you know where a safe direction is. Keep the gun pointed in that safe direction. And now make sure you keep your finger off the trigger, because we're going to practice putting live ammunition into the gun. I would rather have you doing this at a shooting range, but that's not an option right now because you're on lockdown. So basically practice putting it in, closing it, look at it to see what it looks like. Okay, obviously don't put your hand in front of the gun, don't point the gun, your feet or anything. And then what I want you to do is open the gun and just practice, practice emptying it, okay? And then practice putting it back in again. Because you have to be able to load and unload the gun, at will. Now naturally you're going to keep the gun loaded if you're, when the situation gets to the point where you think that you may need to use it for self-defense, and that's because when you get to the point that you feel confident that you can use the gun for self-defense, okay, which means that you may have to practice this for a couple of nights in a row, so practice loading and unloading it. And the reason why we have to be able to unload it and check it to make sure it's not loaded is because we're going to need to do these practice drills every day, where we're coming out and just basically practice coming out, practice coming out, a different direction. Okay, so this is what you got to do to get comfortable with the gun, and then, you make sure that before you do any dry fire practice that you make sure that the gun is not loaded, okay? The nice thing about a revolver, because it has that long trigger pull, you can use a soft holster like this. With most striker fired guns that have a light trigger pull, you have to use a hard Kydex holster because you have such a light trigger pull. You're depending on the holster to protect the trigger so that you don't accidentally hit the trigger and fire the gun. With this gun, because it's got such a long trigger pull, I can use a soft holster because there's no way that I would be able to pull that trigger all the way back through this holster. If you got some oil in the house, preferably gun oil, but if you don't have that, use any oil you have, motor oil. If the gun, is, especially if the gun's a little bit rusty, or if it looks rusty, oil it up. You can use a Q-tip to touch it up in a few places. And that's all I have to say on the Revolver. If you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, please put in the comment section. If you're not a member of the channel, please subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.